lot of chicanery going on in Iowa. And people say, well, then why get behind him if it's fraud? Well, we show there's fraud by him running, and we have Ron Paul there injecting real ideas. But if they cheated him on the time in the debates, if they've done all these other dirty tricks, I mean, what's your view? I mean, I know it's kind of looking backwards, and it can be seen as being, you know, a spoiled sport. But I mean, when the referees are cheating, you've got to call it.
Well, absolutely, you've got to call it. But I think even the cheating has not really diminished substantially Ron's ability to get his message through, Alex. And I think that shows that when you put him head-to-head with Obama and then are polling the entire electorate, not just the Republican electorate, you find Ron scoring better than Santorum.
Well, better than Romney in a lot of them. I mean, he in many of the polls I've seen, Ron Paul, you can look it up, Gallup, you name it, Rasmussen, I mean, I know you know this, Bruce, but he beats Obama with better numbers than Romney.
Yeah, absolutely, because he appeals to independents. And I think that's what's very rewarding about the campaign, that he is changing, you know, the political orthodoxies of the culture more towards liberty and away from empire and ever increasing the size and intrusiveness of government. And it appeals across the board. And the fact that you have Republicans who are at least one slice of the electorate, you know, galvanizing around other candidates, who I call them Tweedledum, Tweedledees to Obama, suggests that that's not representative of the country as a whole. And Ron cares more about the future of the country than any particular party, if you will. And I think that's what makes him a great American, you know, because real high-level politics is trying to make every American a winner. It's not a football game, you know, a winner and a loser, zero-sum. You've got one group of citizens getting gratified off of depressing another group. Hey, we're all hang together. We're all Americans first, so let's make everybody gain, and that's how we can make us a great civilization and honor the ideals of the founding fathers.
You're right. Another hoax. We're going to go to break in a long segment, come back and get into your book and more on Ron Paul and what you see happening. But another big issue is he gets the majority, in some cases over 70% of the Republican candidates that are getting donations from the military. He gets the majority of those. But there's this hoax that, oh, Ron Paul doesn't like the military. He's one of the only people up there that isn't a chicken hawk and actually has served. And, well, I mean, my audience knows that, you know that, but I want to get your take on that briefly, Bruce, because I've never asked you that question on the other side. And then I want to get into more of the attacks on the Bill of Rights and Constitution and where you see this empire going, what the collapse will look like straight ahead with Bruce Fein. We'll be back. Friends, if you want to understand how the crony capitalists are anti-free market and how they're using government to shut down their competition and what Agenda 21 is, what the whole New World Order system is, get my films, The Obama Deception, and, of course, Fall the Republic. We also carry Behind the Green Mask, Agenda 21, excellent book on the subject that's key for county and city and state leaders. It's all available at Infowars.com. Don't ever think just because you're informed to know about all this that your friends, your family, your neighbors don't. And I know I'm, you know, stating the obvious here, but it's so important to speak out individually right now for this country and for a great champion of liberty like Ron Paul, because resistance is victory. Ron Paul didn't get a lot of traction 4 years ago, but he helped grow a big nationwide movement. He's probably gotten 10 times the traction this time around. And the ideas, no matter where this campaign goes, will continue to move forward and grow exponentially. And so look at the whole liberty movement around the focal point, Ron Paul, as almost like the flashpoint, where it starts, one of the key matrix lines that will help shatter this statist centralized system. Now, Bruce, I wanted to talk about your book and how the empire is clearly flailing around trying to expand just so it doesn't collapse, I guess, fleeing forward. But when I see a federal court, you know, circuit court, what is it, the 7th ruling, yeah, police can just pull you over or come in your house without a warrant and download the contents of your cell phone. And now police in Michigan and other states pull you over for speeding, take your phone, download it. Photos, numbers, everything, surfing habits. Drones in the sky, predator drones being used against cattle rustlers, checkpoints, state police gunboats on the rivers, TSA now popping up in Dallas, groping people at the train stations and on the highways. I mean, America has been so free for so long, and there's obviously been problems. But now, I don't know if we're just ready to deal with something this overt. It's so over the top, and people are starting to wake up, but I wonder, is it fast enough? And you've been in Washington, you advise Congress, you're around these people. I mean, it's just so absurdist and cartoon levels, what I'm trying to get at. I don't have words to describe how classically tyrannical and crony, you were mentioning elite groups giving their buddies money and no-bid contracts and energy firm deals. I mean, it's just so obvious. How far will this go?
Well, the problem we have is the empire mentality, at least instinctively covets what I call a risk-free existence. And so every conceivable encroachment on liberty is accepted if you think it might address a problem that might arise as frequently as a meteor or an asteroid hitting the United States, which is virtually never. And it's not just those incidents that you've described more overtly, but the United States government now claims the right without a warrant to seize all of our internet or electronic signatures, all of our footprints there. You know, the Google, the Yahoo, every place, they say that if you expose any information about yourself to a third party, which is impossible to prevent when you're on the internet, the government can come grab it and build a dossier against you. And now the FBI, for the first time in history, Alex, does what they style assessments. Ordinarily, they only begin to investigate someone if there's some articulable suspicion of complicity in crime. Now assessments begin if an agent believes that maybe sometimes in the future you may turn and do something bad, even though there's no evidence that you have you create any danger to society or to
pre-crime
terrorists. Yeah, and so they do assessments, and you're supposed to love it because it clears you of the suspicion that you're a traitor or you're a terrorist. You know, so that now we have the government acting on the assumption that we're all guilty until they prove us innocent, which turns the whole idea of our republic and our unalienable rights on its head. You know, we're free. Liberty is the rule until the government shows that we've done something wrong. And that's just one example of where we are. And to show how absurd this has become, if we look at this last statute that you referred to, the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, here was a situation, Alex, where not a single person in the entire the United States was clamoring to endow the president with more power to send the military to our doorsteps and take us off to Guantanamo Bay based upon secret facts and secret evidence that suggests that we're somehow aiding terrorism. Nobody was clamoring for it, and yet Congress unilaterally, with the assistance of the president, creates power that King George III never possessed when we overthrew him in 1776. And again, it's this instinctive craving when you're a superpower to try to think you can make life risk-free. But you can't unless you're willing to destroy all of liberty. I mean, nobody can guarantee to 100% certainty that they're a saint and they'll never do anything bad. And if you're trying to create life that's risk-free, you'll lock up everybody and everything. And to somebody now who's involved in the safety endeavor, it's a little bit like to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. To somebody at the TSA or involved in the security, everybody looks like a traitor. You know, and that's not what a republic is about.
Well, that's what it is. It's as you said, it's making us all guilty until proven innocent instead of innocent until proven guilty. They had the kite flying event here in Austin over the weekend. It's the biggest in the country, Kite Festival. They had the National Guard out there searching people and just randomly now. I can't even go to the park now without seeing soldiers, and it's just asinine. It's all about a total culture of paranoia.
You're exactly right, Alex. And because what's the track record of these situations? Zero detentions, zero identification of terrorists. You know, look at how many times has the TSA searched, groped, and everything else, us taking pictures. How many terrorists have those machines and searches uncovered? Zero. Absolutely zero. You go on Amtrak here in Washington, there is no searches whatsoever. There have been no incidents before or since 9/11. And it's not that it's conceivable that something bad could happen. You could get a Timothy McVeigh, but we have homicides too. You know, we got 14, 15, 16,000 homicides a year. We don't revel in it, but that's a price that we take if we're not.
Well, what about this as a constitutional lawyer? What about this as a constitutional lawyer? Because I get emails saying, okay, You're saying they haven't stopped one terror attack. That's because they are there. There haven't been terror attacks. Well, by that idea, then you've got to put TSA in every cornfield because there might hypothetically be an attack there. I mean, this is nothing but a pretext to totally power grab.
Exactly right. And they say, well, have these really been the indispensable barriers to another terrorist attack? If they were, how come there haven't been any terrorist attack on Amtrak where there's no searches whatsoever when you go on the train? And moreover, if you just, and this is where I think the politicians and President Obama is especially, subject to criticism. If they would just stop the darn thing for a month and then they'd see there are no terrorist acts, then you'd show that this is Chicken Little saying the sky is falling down. Well, then really wasn't all those checks, that was deterring it because there wasn't any threat there in the first instance. Americans love their government. They're patriotic. They're loyal. They're not going to try to blow up people, just like Americans generally don't commit homicide. It doesn't mean that there can't be an exception, but the price of liberty is to take some risk, and it's going to result in some tragedy. But the greater tragedy is to reduce all Americans to vassals and lords of some big brother government and destroy the whole purpose of government.
I was about to say, I mean, as you know, common sense, history, but the founders, George Washington said, government's like fire. It is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Democide governments, there's big university reports on this. They debate the numbers, but it's between 262 million and 311 million people murdered, non-military combatants, but we're talking 200 plus million conservatively, people killed in the 20th century by government. Well, that's common sense to somebody who knows the Americana system. But for those that love the statist system, I mean, if you want to have prior constraint because somebody might do something, one group we got to watch, and that is always the number one suspect, as our founders said, is government.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Alex. You hit the nail on the head. When you try to examine what is the greatest source of evil in the history of the world, government is greater than individuals by a factor of 1,000,000 to 1. It does, you can have people who commit homicide, even attempt to engage in organized criminal activity, but with regard to the massive, unbelievable, size of the massacres and the atrocities, government is capable and does historically inflict vastly greater mayhem than any individual or group of individuals can ever do. And that explains the numbers that you've identified. And that explains why, in choosing between a danger from an individual and a danger from government, it's the danger of government that's got to be captured first rather than placed ahead. Viewed as less suspect than an individual. And I also want to address this idea, well, the laws don't work because, listen, we prosecuted terrorists before 9/11 and we still ended up with that day of abominations. But the same thing can be said about laws against murder. I mean, we've got 14, 15,000 murders each year. We prosecute people for murder. We sentence some of them to death, but it doesn't end all murders. We still end up with the same number annually. But we recognize, we don't revel in that tragedy, but we recognize that if the only way that you can stop all murders is to send the police or the military into everybody's house and detain everybody on the idea that maybe in the next 20 years they could have an evil thought, that's the end of the United States. That's the end of freedom. That's the end of why we are a country.
Bruce, I want to raise the collapse of the empire and what the time frame is you see in a general sense, because your new book's on that subject, man, then take a few calls. But from my historical research, and those that don't know history are doomed to repeat it, I've been reading history books since I'm about 10 years old just because I found them entertaining. That's actually what got me into talk radio, politics, everything, because I found that the best reading was actually history, because truth is stranger than fiction. Why read a science fiction book or a Louis L'Amour Western when I could read, real stuff that happened and every page was jam-packed? And then, of course, I recognized the same patterns in modern times and didn't see people threatened by it. So that's why I got involved. Same reason Ron Paul did. Same reason you did. I mean, history really is a lens to the future and the present, not just the past. But isn't it that empires always cause their own demise by the attempt to dominate and take over?
There have been about 72 prior empires, and you're exactly right, Alex. It's self-ruination. They collapse because of arrogance and contempt and efforts to control and reach beyond their capabilities. And if you look at the United States, I say maybe we've got 40, 50 years more. It could be shorter than that time before we simply collapse because we cannot support economically the empire, and we cannot protect ourselves when